Well, good morning. It is day 3 of my trip number 4 to Warsaw. Today I am headed to the death camp at Treblinka. Treblinka was the camp where the vast majority of Warsaw's Jewish community was murdered. And so I've been to camps before. I've been to Auschwitz. I guide at Sachsenhausen, but I really aim to go to all of the camps. I think as a historian, and especially a historian of this era and of memory, it's very important for me to set foot on these sites. So yeah, I'm headed there for today. It's about an hour by train to get to a small village. Then you have to take a taxi to get to the camp. So one of the things you need to know about coming, if you're going to go to Treblinka, there's no direct train access to Treblinka. You have to come to the city, Mowinica. I'll put it on the screen, I don't know. And then you have to take about a 15-minute cab ride from here to the campsite. It is so quiet here. You can see the cars, there's people here, but I haven't seen a single person yet. They called the path leading to the chambers Himmelstrasse, Heaven Street. That is ghastly. I don't think I can accurately describe what it feels like here. Look, I've been to a lot of these sites. I've been to sites of mass burial graves in Warsaw. I've been to sites in Berlin. I've been to Sachsenhausen. I've been to Auschwitz. This place is so quiet. Like, Auschwitz is not quiet. There was a lot of people at Auschwitz. It's, for me, like borders on the Holocaust as a tourist attraction, which is gross. But this is different. This is different. I have seen one person here. I am all alone. And I don't think I've ever felt more alone in my life. I should note they do have an app that you can download. And I downloaded it. It's like an audio guide app. And I downloaded it. But it doesn't seem to be working. It's like stuck on this page. And I don't have internet. I mean, I have 3G out here. And nothing seems to be working. So it's hard to know what is what. I did spend quite a bit of time in the museum looking at the mock-up of the camp to get an idea of kind of where we are. And this is the entrance, I believe. And you know, you've seen like in like Schindler's List and things, the entrance to, say, Auschwitz is very grand, but not grand in the sense of, you know, opulent, but like large. And the entrance to this camp was very small, very understated for the Nazis. I feel it here. Like, it's so quiet. And I take in the smells, and you smell the forest, and you smell the, like, decomposing leaves. You hear the birds. Even the birds, there's really no birds. It's just quiet. You can hear in the background, you can hear the traffic sounds of what, if there's a highway back there, I don't know. But you can hear the faint, distant sound of cars to let you know you're yeah. You shouldn't come here expecting to see barracks, gas chambers, crematoria. You will not find that here. The Nazis completely destroyed this camp and tried to cover it up. They bulldozed everything, they tilled the ground, they even went so far as to build a farm over on the top of it and gave it to sold it, quote unquote, to a Ukrainian farmer and his family who lived here, trying to pretend that this didn't ever exist. So this photo is likely taken here, and you can see under here is probably the old gas chambers. And this photo was taken from an album called Beautiful Times. And it was of this place right here that he referred to as the Beautiful Times. The beautiful place he was referring to was a large mass grave pit that was dug here. Now, I saw this in the museum, in the mock-up of the camp, that they had a zoo, and I thought surely that couldn't be right. But no, they had a zoo. The zoo was a resting place for SS men, and in the background, barracks of the Ukrainian guards. They had a fucking zoo here. I always alternate between extreme horror and sadness and grief. A grief that I grieve for something I have never experienced. It's such an odd feeling of grief, but I feel the grief. I alternate between that and just the extreme, absolute anger. Absolute mind-clearing anger. These are the first people I've seen since I came here. If you watched any of my other Poland videos, I made one the very first time I came here. At that time I was trying to track the Jewish sites in Warsaw. Saw the statue of Janusz Korczak, and he was principal of a Jewish orphanage, and he chose to go. He could have escaped, he could have fled. He chose to come to Treblinka with his children and die with them rather than escaping. These stones surrounding the memorial here have names of the people who were murdered here. It was believed when this was built that this was the location of one of the new gas chambers. Later studies have shown that they were a little further down, and this is where a mass burial grave was located. These experiences are always so emotionally draining. I'm exhausted. I've been here about 2 hours, and it's really hot today. I don't think I'm going to go to the work camp. I've seen work camp before. I've seen work camps. Sachsenhausen's a work camp. So I think I'm going to not do that. I don't think I can handle anymore. And I've taken my time here, recording and whatnot. Hour, 2 hours to see this site is probably what you're looking at. And then an hour to get here, an hour to get back, 15 minutes taxi. So maybe say 3 hours travel time. I think it's worth it. I think this is remarkable. This is different than Auschwitz. I mentioned that earlier, but this is different than Auschwitz. At Auschwitz, you see what the camp looked like. They have it set up. They have it set up sort of, for me, like as an educational tool, which is important. This is far more meant to evoke emotion, meant to evoke the memory without having that educational aspect to it. The museum is set up to educate. This is set up to make you feel something. And I think it accomplishes that. All right. I decided I probably couldn't live with myself if I didn't go to the work camp. Just so you know, it's about 2 kilometers from the death camp to the work camp. Just be prepared if you're going to do this and you're going to do both camps. You're going to probably end up walking 6-7 kilometers, 2, 3, 4 miles. So it's a lot of walking. Apparently, this section of this entire road was built by Jewish slave labor, right? And apparently, this section of the road, they found that the Nazis used Jewish gravestones, headstones in here. So they blocked this off from road traffic. Unbelievable. It never fails to, I always say this is incomprehensible. And to not try to make sense of it because it doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Any kind of rational, emotional, any kind of sense, none of this makes sense. Like this entire system was constructed and created to quote unquote eliminate a problem that didn't exist. That was, the whole system was built to end the lives of people. Like I know as human beings we're inventive with killing people. We find ways to cause suffering, but this just, it just doesn't make any kind of sense. Like the more I study this and the more I try to make sense of it, like, in order to make sense of it, you have to rationalize the ideology. I'm not willing to do that. And you have to understand the ideology at a level that it's like, you have to be able to speak objectively about the ideology. And I don't think it's possible. Now, you can explain why this happened, the rationale behind it happening in the Nazi view. But if you're not coming at it from that perspective, it's incomprehensible. This was known as the gravel pit. That is a pit. A few hundred prisoners were forced to labor here, hauling gravel from this pit. They'd work 12 hours a day, and most people died from exhaustion. This may be called a labor camp, a work camp, but it was also a death camp. Arbeit macht frei. Work makes you free. They literally meant that. They will work you until you die, and then you are free. This camp was built as a penal labor camp. Initially, only Poles were used here, but later Jews from the Warsaw district were imprisoned in the camp. On the average, there were about 1,000 to 2,000 people at the camp, all of whom suffered from starvation and terror. The prisoners worked not only in the gravel quarry and camp workshops, but also the railway station in Malkina, where we come in. Some of them were around 20,000 prisoners passed through the camp. Almost half of them died, and the remaining were executed or transported to other camps. The penal labor camp was liquidated in 1944, and the prisoners who were still at the camp were either executed or released. So this is the site of the work camp, and I don't think there's anything left of it either. Right here would have been the SS guards barracks. The absence of anything here is jarring, you know? The absence almost tells a story just as compelling as if everything the Nazis had built was still here. This would have been the SS guards mess room and barracks. It's thought that maybe there was a washroom here as well. There were about 100 guards stationed here. Some were German and Austrian SS guards. Others were what they called Trauniki men, so called because they were trained at Trauniki in Lublin. German and Trauniki guards were housed separately and had different roles in the camp, but they were all known for their brutality toward their prisoners. This was the commandant's headquarters right here. It was commanded by SS Hauptsturmführer Theodor von Eupen throughout its period of operation. The station master at Treblinka railway station described Hauptsturmführer von Eupen as a sadist who ill-treated the Poles and Jews working there, particularly the Jews, taking shots at them as if they were partridges. This was the latrine. This was in the Polish section, but each of the inmate areas had one. Using the latrine often meant that inmates would be humiliated, tortured, and perhaps even killed. Access to the latrines was not allowed after curfew at 10, and so prisoners were forced to go to the toilet within their barracks, for example using buckets. This led to disease and terrible living conditions. This was known as the lazarette. It was located in the administrative area, and when inmates were first brought here to the camp, they were brought to the lazarette to be deloused and disinfected. In Treblinka too, they had a fake lazarette. We saw that area cordoned off by the memorial, and they called it the lazarette because they would tell people that they were going to be disinfected there and checked by the doctors. Instead, they were murdered there. Oh, how nice. This was a pool for the German guards. At least they were having a good time, being able to relax. I'm out of the penal labor camp, and I'm headed to the execution site, which is a half a kilometer further down the road. What's interesting, if you're Catholic, you know what these are. But they have the Way of the Cross, the stations, so you can, I guess, say your rosary on the way to the execution site. That's something. You know, when I see evil like this, it kind of makes me wish I believed in all this heaven and hell stuff, because these guys are almost all dead now, if not all of them. And when their life ended, their torture, their punishment ended. If I believed in hell, I could believe that they were still being punished for all eternity, but they're just gone. And it's our duty to remember their crimes and to not think that we could never be like them. I think that's the mistake that we make, is thinking this is just some singular thing. These people were so super evil. We couldn't possibly do anything like that. And that's simply not true. Never again only means never quite like this again. Doesn't mean things won't happen. The execution site was referred to in the German plans as a cemetery. People that died at the penal camp were brought here to be buried. They also carried out executions here. It was labeled a cemetery, but it was also an execution site. And it was an execution site of workers, Jews, and also Sinti and Roma. Workers from the camp were executed here. Bodies from Treblinka 1, the death camp, were brought here to be buried in a mass grave. This is a memorial for the Roma and Sinti murdered by the German occupiers in the forced labor camp and the extermination camp during the Second World War. Pain and suffering of the victims took the land, which hides the ashes of thousands of innocent people. We bend our heads over your martyr's death. The Roma and the Sinti are, for lack of a better term, what we would call gypsies, although gypsy is a derogatory term. And thousands of Roma and Sinti were murdered here at Treblinka and at the other camps. You don't even hear the cars out here. And I ran into 3 people walking the other way when I was coming out here. There's nobody out here. It is so quiet. Alright, so I'm glad I did do this. I'm glad I ended up walking. Just know that if you do it, it's 2.5 kilometers from Treblinka 1, from the death camp. Then it's an extra 500 meters to the execution site. So you're talking an extra 3 kilometers each way, 6 kilometers. And then if you spend an hour and a half looking at it like I did, you're probably adding about 3 hours to your trip, maybe. So I think it's worth it. I'm not really looking forward to the walk back, but yeah, I'm glad I decided to do it.